So I could talk to you all day about all of his accolades, but I will not. I will be quiet so that we can maximize our time, our precious time with Dr. Ha. Hello, Dr. Ha. Welcome. Please take it away.
Hello. Yeah, it's so nice to, I guess I can't say see people, lots of people I know and know very well, but it's good to be here. And I always love chatting with all of you guys and contributing. So I'll say hi to everybody. And I
And
don't have anything planned,
Doctor, I was going to say, Dr. Ha, can I just say, I'm sorry if you wouldn't mind. I just wanted to say if people have questions for Dr. Ha about his presentation, please post those in the chat. Dr. Ha, we're keeping everybody on mute just to make sure that we can hear you and don't have any background noise and feedback. So if anybody could please post their questions in the chat, and Kyle and I will keep an eye on those for you, Dr. Ha, and we will be bringing those to you as they appear in the chat. But I guess maybe if you could start out, Dr. Ha, and just give a little overview about your recorded presentation, because I know not everybody has had the chance to watch it yet. So if you could just maybe start out that way, and then we'll move on with the questions. How does that sound?
sure. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Always have to have a little chat at the beginning while people get brave and get their questions typed in. Um,
Perfect.
so ADW asked me to talk a little bit about the importance of exercise to our dogs. And I broadened that out a little bit. And as many of you know who have heard me speak before, one of my big concerns is welfare of working dogs, and a primary aspect to good mental health, good welfare, lowered stress, and especially chronic stress is enrichment. And so, what my talk is about is some examples of different kinds of enrichment, and it introduces some concepts like exercise as one form of enrichment, but there's also forms of mental enrichment. Introduces concepts like species typical behaviors. One of the things that we know is very important is that dogs and all animals need the opportunity to show species typical behaviors and can become very frustrated and produce stress when they are limited from doing that. And so I wanted to introduce some of those concepts that we talk about in science about basically good mental and physical welfare for dogs, and provide some examples. So that's what my presentation is about.
Perfect. Well, we actually have our first question for you, and that is if we are uncertain about the emotional impact that our puppies have incurred in this work, our dogs, what they've incurred in this work, why is the recommendation usually to work them until they're 9 to 10 years old?
Well, that recommendation to 9 to 10 years old is a very broad recommendation. It's a very unsupported by science recommendation. We don't have any real data, to support that. That's really the result of a discussion and sort of consensus amongst a lot of very, very experienced trainers who have been around this business for quite a while, and therefore have seen dogs go through their careers basically. And I think the common feeling is that what we need to do most importantly in terms of end of career is to let the dogs tell us when it's time to end or wind down, partial retirement and things like that. But let's just broadly say the dogs should tell us when it's time to retire in a great way, like humans. And so what we tend to find is that most commonly, most of our dogs, the kind of dogs, the breeds, the genetics that we're working with, the kind of work they're doing, in general, we start to see those signs about 9 or 10 years old. So if we have to set some kind of number or guideline point at which you should be especially concerned about watching for your dog to tell you, because it can be very subtle. Um, so, you know,
Well,
it
Dr.
it
Ha, if I could just ask you just a separate piece of that, but on that same vein, for me as a person with a disability with a service dog, you better believe I'm watching all those signs. And Lovey actually retired really early because she told me she was ready. She wasn't up for running to meetings from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. And so I heard that and retired her. But for our facility dog handlers, a lot of them have to deal with administrators and budgeters, right? And so it can be more difficult for them to have to, well, they can see those signs, but then how to communicate that and how to maybe set some policies around that in the industry so that we really can educate people about those signs and symptoms and what those processes should be so that we are honoring our dog's wellness. Any thoughts about that or action steps we might could take?
I think this is one of the critical challenges at this point in the production and the whole generate. I can't find the right word. Generation of this whole program, the evolution of this whole idea of facility dogs. I think one of our biggest challenges is educating the administrators, and I think we need to do a better job of it. So that's where these 9 to 10 year guidelines come up. I mean, if we have to say, odds are, if the only way to do it is to just set a time limit, the 9 to 10 years is probably a good measure. We don't have good science to support it, and that's something I'm interested in working on collecting in a more stringent, careful way. But I think it's going to take a lot of what we really should be doing is to letting the dog tell us. And that's a foreign concept to a lot of these administrators. We still have a huge culture, certainly in the United States, of dogs simply being property, and you work them until they drop and then discard them and get a new one. And so that's what we're trying to change. And I think that's a huge education issue, for the handlers, who are often the ones who have the closest contact with the administrators. Are there better ways to do that education? Like, I don't know, writing articles, or it's other ways of getting to the administrators. I think the best way to do it is let the dog tell you, and you may get 12 years from your facility dog, or you may only get 8 years from your facility dog, and we honor the welfare of the dog. But I think this is a major problem, a major issue.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, well, I know I think it would be a dream team idea to think about you and Dr. Teshi doing a research project on that and coming out with some policy. That would be amazing.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
pressure, but yeah, that
yeah.
would be amazing.
I
Well,
mean,
we
that
have
certainly would help. That's a step that would help for sure.
Yes, yes. And I agree with you about writing the articles. Absolutely. Because then staff, advocates could take those articles and reference those and use those in
Yeah,
creating
yeah,
their own
yep,
policies.
yep.
So that would be awesome. And we want to support you in doing that in any way. Absolutely. Well, we have another question wanting to know, do many service dogs have a deficit in their ability to control their own self environment? And if so, where is it seen most often?
Um, all right. So first off, as I always try to do, let's go to the science. Um, there's a very little bit of science on this, and the little bit of science that has been done, much of it in Europe, um, suggests that there are elevated cortisol levels and stress in a lot of these service dogs that we don't think is necessary, um, and we think that a part of it is due to this enrichment, self-control, their own environment, and so on. However, the data stops there. We don't know that. We speculate that, but we don't know that. So there are some indication that that is the case. In addition, there's certainly anecdotal information and observations, cases that have come up where there have clearly been situations where dogs were working beyond their working lifespan or seem to have a very short lifespan. So simply working lifespan, simply looking at the kind of conditions that many service dogs work under and our knowledge of animal behavior and dog behavior, we would strongly suspect that it is an issue. But to document that hasn't been done. There has not been the funding available to support any of this kind of research. So it's something that the behaviorists are very concerned about. But again, we can't document scientifically that it is the case. We would strongly suspect it's the case. And so let's talk about it. Let's educate about it. Let's just go ahead and see if we can make changes that would help with it. But we really need the science to say for sure.
Yes. And Linda posted a comment in the chat. Thank you so much for that, Linda. She's pointing out that in the retirement video that is part of the workshops, the recorded workshops on the learning site that Jill and Gina Yeager did for us, that the 9 or 10 year retirement age is addressed, and they list detailed explanations in that video of the major changes in the dog's work, their job, and then special awareness about the health and well being of the dog, both physically and mentally. So, if you are seeing that, really encourage everyone to really watch that video. That retirement video is gold. It is so wonderful and so rich with information that can help you in that process.
Yeah,
So,
this is something that I certainly have talked about in some of my past presentations, both here and through Courthouse Dogs Foundation, and that this video, expands on it tremendously and offers a very practical, set of examples and explanations and so on. So, yep.
yeah, yeah. Well, we have another question for you. Wanting to know, because our dogs are bred to have low energy levels, do you have any tricks to sneak exercise in during the day besides walking?
Games. So first, let's say for our dogs, particularly our facility dogs that are bred to have very low energy levels, physical exercise is nowhere near as important. And that's sort of why I wanted to get away from a focus only on exercise, because exercise, some exercise is certainly important for physical health. But for stress relief, for enrichment, for mental health, for allowing the dog to exhibit, species typical behaviors. For these dogs, exercise is not species typical behaviors, and there's not a need for a large amount of that kind of enrichment. Having said that, the way that I suggest it all the time is games. If your dog is prone to it, and a lot of these dogs are retrievers, having a fetch command and a drop command can get some exercise very quickly for our dogs. I say, very often that you should play fetch with your dog and until they drop. And for some of our dogs, that's about a minute and a half or something. But it doesn't take a lot. But you're providing that movement. It's another reason that I really like the food puzzles, because many of the food puzzles cause them to roll things around, have to push things, move around, and that's exercise. Along with food searching ability and using their cognitive ability and so on. You also get some physical movement, physical exercise out of it. Is that going to be adequate for a border collie? Not even close. Is it adequate for our dogs? Quite possibly.
Well, we have another question coming in too, and that is, do you think there's any benefit to play dates with other dogs if they aren't regularly exposed to them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest concerns we have with service dogs is socialization. Dogs are highly social species. And so one of the biggest enrichment deficits that we suggest that we see, that a few little studies have shown, and we're certainly conceptually, I mean, looking at the dogs and how the dogs are handled, what kind of work the dogs do, we'd be very concerned about, is the socialization and the play dates. Now, we need to be extremely careful about those play dates. We need to be very structured about those play dates. Um, I am not a huge fan of off-leash dog parks, and I'm certainly not a huge fan of off-leash dog parks for service dogs. However, socialization, and regular contact with dogs they enjoy, and again, your dog should tell you which dogs they enjoy being with. And I know Franny is not a highly social dog. That's a personality trait. That's simply a personality trait of hers. But when she finds a dog that she really likes, she was out doing zoomies across 3 different front yards the other day because she met a golden retriever on the street who threw a play bow, and Franny just exploded and started racing into people's backyards and all over, just having a ball. And the two of them were just, going at it, and fantastic play. And other dogs she completely ignores. So, putting them together with other dogs that they don't like or are threatening is a negative. But structured play dates that you think about and manage, I think, are really, really important.
Great, thank you. And here's another question for you. Can you provide more examples on scent work and scent enrichment? I love the opportunity to have free walks where the dogs go and sniff what they want, as well as the puzzle games. But what are some other helpful scent enrichment activities?
So, what I was suggesting there is that this is a huge area, a huge topic, a very active area. And the best recommendations I can give is to go to some of those resources, like the ASPCA scent work, like the nose work. I think it's nose work is the catchphrase, opportunities, and see what they have. They have entire curricula. You can do things like planting scents on your walks, very distinct scents, and the dogs can be, taught to search for them, on a sort of a casual basis, but actually search for them, be rewarded, right, when they find them. And it adds an intensity and an olfactory nose scent intensity to their walks. There's an entire protocol for formally teaching your dog how to become a detection dog, a scent detection dog. There are competitions, there are clubs that meet regularly and set up courses in training studios and indoor facilities and the outdoor facilities, and you can take your dog through them and see how many of the scents your dog can actually locate accurately. And I mean, you can get into it in a very small way, and you can get into it in a very big way, but you can literally buy the scents in little bottles. You can literally buy little cans with a wool pad, a cotton pad in the bottom, and holes in the top that you put the scent, a few drops of the scent, and you teach your dog, and then give you the whole protocol that you teach your dog to be able to find them. Stash them around the house. Let your dog take 20 minutes trying to find them all wherever you stash them in the house. When he finds them, he gets rewarded. When he finds them, he has to come back and find you for the reward or whatever. And that's the stimulation and size too.
That's great. That's great. Well, I have to say another question we have coming in, and this is one I always think about too, is what do you think is a good work time, a work schedule? Do you think that it's good to do an hour, or what would you recommend as a reasonable work day schedule?
I think these dogs are flexible enough to not not really care about a specific work schedule, and it also depends so much on the individual dog, and and as they age. What I'm more worried about is running at finding the comfortable level for your dog and running at that level, and then making sure that that level is adjusted by carefully watching the behaviors of the dog and having the dog tell you that's too much 2 years or 4 years or 6 years down the road. So what I would say is absolutely the best thing for you to do is to work closely with the handlers and the trainers and the organization. And they are the people who know that individual dog the best. They're the people who know that line of dogs the best. I think it's going to vary from genetic line to genetic line and personality to personality. What we do know, and I've presented this data several times in various presentations to various organizations, what we do know is that there is some information that suggests that the hardest thing, the most stressful thing for facility dogs is jumping quickly into new, different contexts. So to whatever degree it can be managed, and there are limits on this. I mean, they are working dogs. They're there to work, but to the degree to which you can avoid half an hour in one room with one family and then quickly half an hour in a room to another family and then a half an hour in a room to another family, that's an hour and a half of working time, and that's much more stressful than an hour and a half with one family. Don't
Okay.
worry about an hour and a half with one family because it's not the length of time, it's the changes, the chopped up changes. So if you're going to do a lot of changes during the day, a lot of short sessions during the day, you need bigger gaps and rest times in between.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. That's excellent. And another question is, when you're allowing breed specific games and activities, is it okay to allow obedience to fall by the wayside?
Um, I think I would have to say, I don't know. I would want to work with the handlers and trainers for your organization to discuss that. Again, I think, in my opinion, that that's going to be a balance. That's going to depend on the job the dog is doing, the kind of role it plays, the personality of that dog. And I think, in the best of all possible worlds, if you wanted to start putting some of these suggestions into active, rotation and so on, consult with your organization, consult with your handlers, consult with the trainers. If you have doubts, consult with the people that you can consult with who know the dog. And I think that's the best answer. I don't think it's necessary to let obedience fall by the wayside. I think an important part of social interaction and even enrichment, I mean, mental enrichment is the obedience. I mean, much you can do in one day, spending time working with your dog. And how to reach that balance, I think, is an appropriate question for the people who know your dog the best.
Well, that is another similar question that's been posted, and that is, how often should we be doing these types of mental enrichment activities?
Well, the nice thing about them is, in general, unless you're letting obedience slide or something like that, we don't know. First, we don't know. There's no science on this. Second, we know it helps, but how much? Getting down into the details. And second, I'm not sure we can know because it is so specific to your dog's personality. And that means genetics and line and training and background and age and all those things. Um, what we do know is it's a nice kind of situation because you really, unless you're letting other things slide, you can't do too much. So what we generally find is it's a linear kind of thing. Anything you do, it produces an improvement, and you can't do too much. You may not get any more improvement, but I don't think there's specific guidelines. So I think it's a matter of fitting it in, with the lifestyle. And I tried to emphasize that a lot of these things don't need to take a long time. I mean, but does mean that at least with Franny, feeding the dog can take about 30 seconds because she just right, blows through it. And feeding the dog now, if you're running out of the house, feeding the dog from a trick or treat ball or something like that, providing the stimulation, takes 10 or 15 minutes, which is the point. But, sometimes we're standing around waiting for the dog to finish, sometimes we just put the food in the bowl if we're in a hurry. So it's hard to say exactly, how long for any given dog. I do think it doesn't have to take a long time out of each day to produce significant benefits. It certainly can. You get into doing nose work competition on the side or something like that. I mean, but it doesn't have to take. I mean, we're 15 minutes, an extra 15 minutes a day, or half an hour a day would provides a lot of stimulation or exercise or something like that. And with our dogs that are of lower energy level, shall we say, I think there's a real possibility of reducing to some extent if you're doing lengthy walks, which are good, particularly if you let the dog have control of the walk, replace those with some scent work inside. In other words, replace more of the physical with more of the mental. And I often encourage people to do that. If you have a border collie, it's a different story. But for our dogs, I think the mental is almost or more important than the physical.
That's a great point. Well, and Jill has made a comment in the chat just about balancing behavior, and thinking about how that might that re-traumatization, about working with victims and how that needs to be taken into consideration. Do you have any thoughts about that, about trauma informed and secondary trauma in working with our dogs and how that might impact the dog's behavior and possibly re traumatize the survivor that we may be working with?
I don't. In fact, I'm not
Wow, that's
sure.
a first.
I
Yes.
am not sure I even have to say, Jill, that I quite understand the point.
Jill, I don't know if
We
you want
certainly
to
don't want to
post
do
anything.
anything that's going to re-traumatize the victim, but I'm
Right.
not sure how.
Well, I guess, one thing, and when I read that statement, I think about, always being careful of how my dog is behaving, so that if my dog is starting to get tired and not wanting to interact with the survivor, I don't want anything that's going to make the survivor feel like they're being rejected by my dog. That's one thing that I think about. Even having a service dog and having them interact with the survivors that I'm working with, I want to make sure that it's a positive interaction and they don't feel rejected in any way.
And that's my concern in terms of reducing the chronic stress and shortening the working life of the dog, where I think I see dogs, for instance, at ADW and Courthouse Dogs Foundation gatherings where people are bringing these dogs. I see the dogs showing signs of stress and tired and so less reactive to commands and all of these kinds of signs of stress at the end of a day, at a seminar, at a symposium. And so what I'm concerned about is at the end of a working day in the advocacy center, in the courthouse, um, is it possible that the dog is starting to show some signs of stress and are not responding in the way that we like, and are, to some extent that should be telling us it's time to reduce the workload, and we want to make sure we don't overload the workload so that we can extend the working life of the dog.
That's a great point. Well, we have another question, that goes back to that scent stimulation and wanting to know, is there hearing stimulation that can be rewarding to dogs, like music for dogs or TV for dogs, when we do have to leave them at home? Do you think that there could be any stimulation benefit there?
Yeah, I actually thought about that as I was putting together the presentation, and we have so much less developed information about those, but really we do need to mention visual stimulation. It is not nearly as important for dogs, but certainly is a form of stimulation. I'm on the scientific review board, advisory board for dog TV, And so the problem with we have found with dog TV is that for some dogs it's extremely soothing and highly stimulating and entertaining and wonderful, and for a whole heck of a lot of dogs it's stressful and anxious, and they treat them as intruders. They're overstimulated. It's so dog TV is a two-edged sword depending on the personality of your dog. Um, and so we know very little. We do have some research on scent work and the reduction of cortisol and so on. And we first focused on scent work, of course, because dogs are so scent driven. I mean, dogs are primarily scent driven. So we thought, well, something's going to help. If something's going to produce interesting results in dogs, anyway, it's probably going to be something to do with scent stimulation. We have very little. We have very, very little on sound. We know we certainly use white noise as a calming influence in dogs, in specific anxiety and separation anxiety cases and things like that. We have research going on at the University of Wisconsin right now on some really neat research. It's already been done for horses and for cats, producing stress reduction quote music for dogs. They have stress reduction music for cats. It is not stress reduction music for humans. It's horrible, but it's amazing calming effect on cats. And so, of course, now the researchers are trying to produce the same kind of thing for dogs, by studying the frequencies that dogs respond to, the pitches that dogs respond to, how dogs communicate. We don't know most of this stuff for dogs, so we've got to figure that out before we can start designing literally orchestration, literally music played by an orchestra that is calming and soothing and so on. It's been done for cats, neat study. Done for horses, fascinating, neat study. Evolutionarily appropriate, dog appropriate, calming sounds,
Thank
loosely referred to as music.
Thank
But we
you.
just don't know. We really don't know anything about it. Certainly, people find that when we deal with separation anxiety and things like that, we often can find certain kinds of music that is calming to dogs. It's a hit or miss thing. It's an anecdotal, case by case clinical kind of thing. No real research has been done.
Well, Jill just posted again and clarified what her question and her comment, and she was saying it was in response to the obedience question. Any behavior that is going to re-traumatize the victim is something that needs to be taken into careful consideration when advocates and handlers are doing canine games.
And that's why I assume we need to be careful about having to replace obedience or obedience reinforcement, continued training, ongoing training, anything like that. It certainly shouldn't get in the way of that. None of this needs to or should get in the way of the working dog and the role that the dog is intended to play. So again, I think this can be done without introducing inappropriate behaviors. Inappropriate behaviors being behaviors around victims that might re-traumatize them. But again, it depends on the individual dog, and the handlers and trainers and organization are going to be the ones that can best incorporate this into your dog's life. And I would hope that those organizations would begin making such suggestions appropriately for their training programs, their obedience programs, their dogs, their genetic stock, and so on.
Thank you. Okay, another question. Since these dogs are with us most of the day and night, they can become one with us. How do we reduce separation anxiety when we do have to be separate from them?
So the best thing to do now, I'm going to talk about this from the point of view of any dog. And Jill, whatever, jump in if you see issues with this in terms of the role that these specific dogs or how they're trained. The way that I deal with separation anxiety always in any dog is to make, you know, I mean, we'll make this simplistic, but the best thing that happens all day is you leaving the dog at home. And so you reward the dog. I mean, no dog of mine is ever left alone without a long lasting, very fun novel used only for departures, food puzzle or chew toy or bone or rawhide if you do them or don't do them. Peanut butter in a puzzle feeder that I know takes her at least a half an hour to get out of that puzzle feeder. And she only gets it in that puzzle feeder, that kind of peanut butter, when we need to leave her. And so when we are putting our keys in the pocket, the first question from her is, am I going someplace? And when we tell her and it becomes clear that she's not going with us, she perks right back up again. And then it's a matter of, okay, where's my treat? Where's my treat? You can't leave without my treat. And if we do leave without the treat, she's standing up at the door, literally paws up on the glass door as we're looking at the house and we're going, what the heck is she? Oh, we forgot to give her a treat. And so it's like, you don't leave the house, you know, without your treat. But it's all a positive effect. It's all a great thing. And the best time, you know, for people who are leaving regularly every morning and leaving the dog at home, you know, I tell them to get into that habit. And the dog is like, in the morning, the dog is going to be like, get out the door, come on, get out the door, because I don't get my really cool treat until, you know, you get out the door. And so basically they should be rewarded for your departure, and something very long lasting. It takes their mind off of it. If you take their mind off of your departure and the anxiety around your departure for anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, then it's not a problem. They forget. They basically settle right down. And so, you know, it's a matter of turning the thing around, taking what can be a negative, right? Almost a punisher, right? You're leaving me, and you know, and I'm in an aversive situation, a negative situation, an anxious situation, and turning that around and making it, you know, a very surrounded by a very happy situation.
Okay. Well, another question is, can you explain what's happening when dogs are sniffing behind one another? Trees, hydrants, etc.
Yeah,
G
you
Go
mean
ahead, please.
yeah, Geo. Yeah, so yeah, it's just the same as Franny. What a coincidence. Dogs are olfaction. The dogs are scent driven, and that sniffing is telling them a massive amount of information about who was there, and we mean what dogs were there, and when they were there, and what their emotional state was when they were there, and what their physiological state was when they were there, estrus, for instance, and things like that. Aging, they were sick when they were there. And so they are exchanging information. When dogs are sniffing behind one another, they're sniffing the anal gland. And that anal gland, which dogs rub on the ground and all over the place, provides a huge amount of information. Urine provides, you know, half the purpose of urine is getting liquid and toxic, you know, byproducts out of the body, and half of it for dogs is chemical communication. And a huge amount of information is provided to a dog by sniffing that urine spot. And again, who was there, when they were there, what shape they were in, whether they were in a good mood or a bad mood, all of that comes out in the urine. All of that comes out in the scent marks. And so all of that is in the facial glands and the neck glands and then the anal glands of the dog, of an actual dog. So they're sniffing all of those and determining exactly who that is and what I remember about their past experience, and so on from all of that sniffing. And that's what we need to encourage them to do a lot, because that's what they do all day, every day, a lot. That's some of that species typical behavior.
Can you make any suggestions on how to make a more interactive, calming living environment for our dogs?
Um, I think it's I think that's what the points I was trying to make. I think being providing that stimulation, whether you do it through a sport like nose work, whether you do it through casual increased play behavior, whether you do it through good quality play dates, very, very important, whether you do it if your dog, exercise, jogging, if that, I think that's the interactive part. And the interactive part for our dogs is twofold. One is interaction with us, and the other is interaction with other dogs. And so I think it's thinking about this as much mental stimulation as physical stimulation. And when you think about the mental stimulation, think about the scent stimulation. And that's why for me, taking Franny for a walk that she control. Also think about the calming. It is calming for dogs to have some control over their own environment. And so, for instance, the walk where they lead the walk. And if they want to go left at the corner, they're free to go left at the corner. You can make it a command, literally, where you give them a command which says they get to choose if you want the structure. And so, where they, and then of course there are other times, and it's important to distinguish them. For instance, vest on, vest off walks, or change the kind of leash that you're using, or something like that. And when we take walks in this place, they're for you and they're unstructured. When we take walks from the parking lot to the courthouse, it is not unstructured. It's very structured, and dogs easily can distinguish between those and should. And so I think the calming, interactive and calming living environment for dogs is this one where they have at least some control over their environment and enough stimulation. And I really mean mostly mental stimulation.
So we've had a couple people asking about. Oh, I'll ask that one in a minute. Here, let me ask Jessica's question. How can we manage their stress when they're in a situation as a bystander? That's a great question. For example, if someone's on the phone with a victim who's in crisis, I can always pick up on that, and the dog can pick up on that stress as well. So what can we do to manage that? Absolutely, especially too if we're in situations even in court or something when things are starting to escalate. How can we, and we're getting stressed, how can we help to manage the dog not to get stressed?
I think um, this is a fine line for me because I would think that the handlers, the trainers, Jill would have better input on this than I would, because I would come at it from the non-working dog side, where physical contact with your dog is calming. Um, but I think to a great extent, these kinds of working dogs, that is part of the daily work, and that's why they're the personality they have. And I mean, I think physically touching them, putting a hand on their head or something like that, for me would be sufficient. And otherwise, this is the kind of stress that they need to be able to handle themselves. And I'm not sure we need to do anything for them. What would be important is to note that they are getting stressed in that situation, and therefore, do they and you qualify for a break before the next stressful situation? So I'm not sure you need to do something at the moment. I think they are well equipped, personality wise and training, to handle that stress, just record it mentally as, remember, they are getting stressed even though you're just on the phone. There's nobody there, but it is getting stressed. So that should be ticking. That was a stressful event, in not only for you, but for your dog that day, right? And what I'm trying to, I think, get at is that there should be an effort to control the number, length, duration, frequency of those stressful events in a given day before the dog begins to show chronic long-term effects.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, thank you. Another question is, we often have a regular walk routine every day. Is that boring to my dog? Should I be constantly looking for new routes and mixing it up?
I think you've got to look at your dog. So what I find is a little both. I thought our regular walking route with Franny was boring, getting boring. So I would mix it up, and we would go walk on the beach. We would go walk around the edges of the community park, because I thought it'd be great stimulation. And it is. She loves it. And then when she comes home, she wants a regular walk. And so predictability and regularity and repetition is part of a normal behavior for dogs. But what I think, and what I'm pretty sure most behaviorists agree on, is that regular walk is the social event of the day. In other words, particularly if it's near the house, they want to know what's going on in their yard. They want to know what's going on in their neighborhood. And there's a stress with not knowing that. Franny acts out if we don't take her on walks down the street every day. She actually starts getting to be a little pissant, and acting out a little bit. And she would never sit and bark at us, but she certainly sits and talks at us. And it's like, what do you need? You've been fed. Oh, you didn't get your walk, right? And she wants to know what's going on in the neighborhood. And she feels much better if she gets that walk, let's say once a day, once every other day. She feels much better, just stress-wise, mental stress-wise. Going to the beach, as fun as that is, and how many great things there are to eat on a saltwater beach, yuck. It doesn't substitute for that familiar social walk around the neighborhood and all the other, checking out what's going on with all the other dogs that are in the neighborhood. She doesn't see any of the dogs usually, but they've all left their signals. They've all left their information. So, what we think about is having that short neighborhood walk routine every day, and then either skipping a day, but not more than a day, or shortening the neighborhood walk so that there's time during the day to do something novel. A short novel walk. It doesn't take a long novel walk. It's just a short but novel walk. It gives that mental stimulation. But so it's the walks can serve two different kinds of purposes and reduce stress in two different kinds of ways, or reduce two different kinds of stress or something.
Well, Dr. Ha, we have just a couple of minutes left, and I was just wondering if you had any final thoughts for us today, or anything, one thing that we should set as a goal for ourselves today, or this weekend, to start doing with our dogs to support their wellness.
I think I would like to see people think about and talk about, and that would include with your trainers, with your handlers, get advice about, in other words, let me finish. Adding some stimulation and control of the environment. Think about, maybe you already provide that. Think about ways that you could relatively easily provide that. But so much of this is so individual to the dog and to you as a handler and to the environment that they work in, that I encourage you to talk up, individually, consult with me. I'm happy to have a chat, and where we can get into, and I do a lot of this kind of advising, where I can get into more the details of more uh, tailored for that individual dog and that individual situation. And certainly, Jill and all of her group provide a fantastic resource for this kind of stuff. I think many of you may be providing plenty of this, and others, might be able to think about how you can incorporate a little more of this into the dog's life. And if we can get a little bit more of this into the dog's life, it's not going to hurt anything, and I think it could really extend the working life and the welfare, improve the welfare of these dogs.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you for those closing thoughts and for being such a wonderful resource to us as new research is emerging. You're our go to for that so that you can
Absolutely,
guide us and train us so that we can be better handlers and we can
absolutely.
and give better care to our dogs. Thank you so much, Dr. Ha.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for being with us. I cannot believe we're at the end of our convening, but so glad that you were able to join us. Huge thank you to everyone who made this convening possible. Jill, Linda, Kyle, John, Liz, and of course our funder, the New Mexico Crime Victims Reparation Commission, and of course each one of you for your commitment to this work, for what you're doing every day with your dogs. And for those of you who are thinking about getting a dog and are curious about it, you've just all made the time to be with us. And that is a lot these days. So we do not take that one bit for granted. So much gratitude to you. The learning site is your go-to, and you can definitely get everything you need there. And you can always email me or John, and Kyle and Liz are amazing resources for you. And if you're interested in talking more about getting a dog, please reach out to Liz or any of us so that we can put you in contact with her if you want to have that conversation if you're thinking about it, because I certainly can't encourage you enough to explore it and see if it's something that you'd be interested in for your organization, because it can be a game changer for the individuals that you serve, both young and older individuals. It's awesome. Yeah, so thank you so much for what you do. Big, big group hug I'm giving to everybody. Thank you so much. And if you need anything, you know where to reach us. We love to hear from you. So please stay in touch, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Bye, everybody.